Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I am your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Lisa or Alyssa or James or Jamie Shupe. We get into why with the names in this episode. Mr./Ms. Shupe was the first person to be awarded non-binary status in the United States. They detransitioned in 2019 and were quite active in the conversation around transition and detransition and gender ideology for some time, and then they dropped off the map. In this conversation, we talk about what has been going on with them, and it is a very honest, very raw conversation. I have to apologize for not performing sympathy in this interview. I thought it was very important to just listen and let Mr./Ms. Shupe tell their tale, which is a very powerful tale. So, without further ado, here is Lisa Shupe.
Oh, hey, Benjamin, you caught me getting ready here.
Hey, Shupe, how you doing?
I'm okay. I guess we can really put this away. We don't need this. Yeah, one of the most interesting things that I ran across at Portland's Q Center when I was in the support groups, when I stopped IDing as a trans woman and I started hanging out with the genderqueer folks. So I would go to their group at the Q Center, and the group leader, Kim, would show up and she would do the most unnerving freaking thing. She would sit down and she would take her wig off and just set it on the table.
Okay.
And we would begin group like that.
What did that symbolize, you think?
I never quite figured that out. It was really, like I said, it was really unnerving coming from the trans groups where, you never ever take your wig off. You're always feminine. And here this person is coming in. They were male born. They identified as genderqueer.
Yeah.
And popping their wig off like this and just setting it on the table. It was like, what do you do with this?
Oh no. Yeah.
So anyway, we're gonna skip the props from the wig today. We'll do the interview like that. So let me get my headset on and we'll go from there. Okay, so we're ready to, I guess, get ugly on this one.
Oh well, who knows? Has it been like 18 months since we spoke? It's been like a year and a half, I think.
I want to say 2.5 years.
2.5 years. Okay. 2018, maybe.
No, I looked at the dates, and I think you did it on March 5, 2019.
Okay.
So wouldn't that be 2.5 years?
That would be 2.5 years. I skipped 2019 for some reason. Or maybe it was 2020 I'm blocking out.
I know when I looked at that on the calendar and on YouTube, I was like, oh my God, it's been 2.5 years since I spoke to him.
Yeah, people still comment on that, on our video. They still come by and ask how you've been. Because you vanished. You became the focus of a lot of discussion. And you wrote an article and you shared that with me. We don't know if it's going to be published or not, but you kind of explained that you were kind of being used by all these different groups for a while. Your story was kind of became ammo or a talking point or a field of discourse, maybe, if we're going to be really generous, for all these other political parties and ideologies. But you have your own story, and it didn't just stop there. Yeah, you're right. But one of the things that really kind of just screwed me up was Twitter locking my account in February. I'm trying to think which time frame was. February 2020, I believe, was when I got locked out. And the reason I say it screwed me up is it was kind of like my support group in a way. Hanging out with all those gender critical folks and even, the religious folks who were my supporters as well, just having that all of a sudden vanish, it made it a lot harder to stay on track. And, as I've explained to you, I've had a really rough 2.5 years since we talked. Yeah, and losing my little online support group did not help whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah.
that article again, I don't know how to reference it correctly for the viewer, but in it, or just I guess that story of the last 2.5 years, it's so heart-wrenching just how much pressure it seems that you've been under. And there's themes of compulsion and misdiagnosis and your struggle to understand yourself and everybody who could possibly help you not understanding. It's this black box that you're bringing up specifically with regards to male sexuality. And the subclass of paraphilia is what you're highlighting, that there's this very intense, for some males, drive that, how do you manage that? And nobody really understands it, because male sexuality is kind of this icky topic for women and men. Like, men don't want to look at it, and women don't want to necessarily be exposed to it. That's one thing we could talk about, but I want to follow you and follow your lead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the easiest thing for the audience is us to just kind of do a timeline of sorts of, what's transpired since we talked. And I think people would probably find that most fascinating, and that'll hit the points. To what you're speaking of, I'm about as canceled as you can get at this point, because the left has used me up for they got their non-binary mileage out of me, and they got all the coverage they wanted with that. The right side, on the other hand, they got to hold me up and parade me around as the famous D-sister, the detransitioner, which was true and untrue, and we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. But so now in my position of going back under the trans umbrella, I'm pretty sure they're not going to be writing any articles about me anymore. Yeah. So like I said, I guess we can start with, we'll just get back to February 2019, and it was my awakening moment of, okay, I'm not a female, I'm not non-binary, I don't really have a gender identity. What I've got going on is a paraphilia. And that paraphilia is autogynephilia. I am like textbook Dr. Blanchard. I mean, it's as good as it gets with me. I mean, that guy's got to love me and I'm not telling lies to prop him up. All I'm doing is telling the truth about my behaviors, and that props him up. It sheds light on just how correct his theory is. Okay, so sounds good. I'm going to decis, detransition. I have to preface that with, I didn't plan on going off hormones, because I have learned my lesson that every time I try to go off hormones, all my problems come back. That's why I say, I mean, it would be really easy for me to be a D-sister or detransitioner, or whatever people want to frame this thing, if I had went through surgery, which I didn't, because I would no longer have any testosterone. So what happens to me is, every time I try to quit, my testicles come back to life. The testosterone comes roaring back. I've got the urge to cross-dress again. I feel like I'm a woman again. I want to, act out sexually and get my female identity validated by men. And it just, it's a horrible mess of all the things going on. I go through what Blanchard called, the binge and purge stages. I go out, that's a good example. So, like I said, February came along, March, my hormones got cut off by the doctors. Their thinking was, okay, so if you're not identifying as female or non-binary, we're not giving you any more hormones. So,
and the hormones acted as a suppressant then, or did they act physiologically by suppressing your sex drive? And they acted, I guess, palliatively with feeling more feminine. Was it like both of those things, or more of one and the other with regards to the cross-sex hormones?
I wouldn't give them credit for the feminine thing that much. Now, I would give them credit for feminization of the body. Of course, when I'm on hormones, my breasts pop up. puff up. I stopped growing body hair, which bothers me. My skin stops being oily, all those sorts of things. So I stopped waking up in the morning with erections. That bothers me. So it fixes all of that stuff, but it also cures the sexual behaviors. It's like, one of the examples given is being aroused just by the act of like putting on a bra or a pair of panties, which when I have normal testosterone levels, that's the effect I get. Mm-hmm. So so the clothing no more becomes, it's sexualized, not anymore, mm-hmm. if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it feels better in all of those aspects, but at the same time, I go through, after a period of time, I start getting regret about not having any sex drive. And, you're prone to gaining weight on this when you're chemically castrated as well. So those things start taking a toll on you. And you lose physical energy. I mean, I'm still way stronger than a female my age. She would have to be in really good shape to outdo me in something, athletically. But, I do lose strength from it. And it's not, physical health wise. Yeah. There's a lot of problems with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the or the VA, the Veterans, what does the A stand for? I should know that.
Departments of Veterans Affairs.
Okay, Veterans Affairs. They cut off that remedy for you because they have tied that specifically to gender identity. And once you lose your gender identity, you lost access to hormones. Exactly. Even though gender identity wasn't what the hormones were about for you.
Well, not under their policies, it is. Yeah. And I had spent from early 2013, all the way up until that point, either identifying as female or non-binary with them. Mm-hmm. So they were always able to justify giving me the hormones.
Okay.
And this is an important point. So once I stopped going along with, hey, I'm not female, I'm not non-binary, that kind of, in their eyes, even though it shouldn't have, it took gender dysphoria off the table. And it put me into, autogynephilia is a paraphilia. And most people aren't aware of this, but a paraphilia is excluded from coverage.
Do you know why that is? There's probably a lot of different reasons, but if a paraphilia is interrupting your functioning or causing you to harm yourself, wouldn't that supposed to be covered under insurance?
A logical person would think that, but no, they don't.
Okay.
There was literally a page on the VA website from 2011 that, to my knowledge, is still in effect, where they're saying it's classified under sexual disorders. And this gets into, I'm pretty sure this is why gender dysphoria was created versus gender identity disorder. Because in that exclusion, it specifically mentions gender identity disorder being excluded. So, they just rebranded gender identity disorder into gender dysphoria and kind of did an end run about the exclusion.
Yeah. So for probably social or political reasons, who knows why they have excluded sexual disorders from coverage. Mm-hmm. That's their policy. But then they built a little trapdoor in. If you get into this identity thing, then you're free. You're home free. It's no longer a sexual disorder.
Well, it's important to note the government didn't build it in. The folks who run the DSM built it in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they control the language.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So they just created something new after the law was written. See where I'm going with that? That's the way the whole. I don't know how else to explain what they did, because that sure looks like exactly what they did.
Okay. And so for somebody who is wanting to be honest about their paraphilia, they have to play a game in order to receive treatment for a paraphilia.
Yeah, you have to get treatment under gender dysphoria versus walking in and saying, hey, I've got autogynephilia, it's a paraphilia,
Yeah.
and it's harming me, it's harming my spouse, and I want to get chemically castrated because of this.
Yeah.
They're going to boot you out of there. But if you walk in and say, hey, I've got gender dysphoria, they most likely won't even ask you any questions, and they'll give you all the drugs you want.
Okay. How has that affected you to have to play that game? Has that increased your distress or blocked you from being able to be more holistic about understanding and finding help for your mind and your body and your sexuality, to have to play this game with the VA?
It's distressing because it's like I've moved on from it. I don't want people lying to me anymore. I just want you to just tell me straight up, what exactly is wrong with me. Let's explore why I'm doing it and treat me accordingly. And that doesn't allow this to happen. See, I guess an interesting point to make on this is if we ask the question, what comes first? Did my paraphilia, did my autogynephilia come first, or did my gender dysphoria come first? And the harsh answer is the paraphilia came first. So if that is the basis of my gender dysphoria, and it's also the basis of my gender identity, why are we not treating it rather than, just like playing this little game like you're saying and say, hey, we're treating gender dysphoria?
So once you got booted from Twitter for an undisclosed thus far reason, you lost your support network. In what way was that support network helping you with the paraphilia?
No. Okay, well, I'll explain the Twitter thing first, which was pretty insane. The only thing I did was I tweeted an article from about a father in Canada who was complaining about his daughter being put on testosterone. Yeah. And I excerpted a little, few sentences about one of his comments or something. Next thing you know, my account was locked. And I appealed it, and of course they denied it, and I'm pretty stubborn that I wasn't going to delete the tweet, so I just walked away. But so what I'm calling my little online support group of hanging out with the gender critical folks, it wasn't really so much. Well, I guess you could say it was. To be fair, it was kind of helping with all of it, because it was kind of like going to a literally like showing up at a 12-step meeting every day, which I was doing that in the background around that time too. But my physical 12-step meeting was only once a week, and it was just it was not nothing. It wasn't they were trying to be helpful, but they couldn't understand me. So I was surrounded online by people who did understand me, and who wanted me to succeed, and I lost that. Yeah. And I guess we can talk about the like I said, I enrolled in a 12-step program, and it was faith-based, but it didn't have like really heavy religious overtones. I called it the center service. We showed up on like a Wednesday night when church was basically closed, and we had, like I said, it was literally like a 12-step meeting. But the flaw in the program was they were treating all addictions the same. So, it's like we go through our little routine of having our center service and go through the steps and everything, and then we'd break off into groups. And I mean, it's like when I'm sitting there with people who have alcohol issues or drug issues, or maybe they're addicted to pornography, and I'm sitting there with a paraphilia, how do I explain that to folks like that? It wasn't helpful.
Is the paraphilia compels you toward behavior, as you describe in your article, that seems very compulsive. So it seems like it's related to some sort of addictive compulsion. That's what I gather. How is it different? How is it the same as an addiction? Is it like something that precedes the behavior, or I don't really I don't know how to conceptualize an addiction. So maybe you would be helpful to explain that.
Let me see if I can break this down into pieces. Okay. So one part of it, back to what Blanchard calls the binge and purge thing. So, testosterone in my system, I am inclined, and this stuff is in his literature too. It's not just me making it up. So I am inclined to, constantly be going out shopping. I'll be out buying wigs, I'll buy, out thrift stores, shopping for high heels, just some of it is over the top clothing and some of it is normal clothing, but it's kind of like you're just out there on this big shopping spree. And then the purge stage of it is when you start getting ashamed of what you did, and you're like, no, I got to stop this, and you get rid of it all. So you keep buying it and keep throwing it away. So that's compulsion. And then I can see where people think that looks like addiction. Now, my compulsive sexual behaviors, people would be inclined to say, oh, well, he doesn't really have anything wrong with him other than compulsive sexual behavior. Which that's kind of a flaky diagnosis. A lot of people don't even agree whether that exists or not. There's kind of a joke that it doesn't exist until you've got yourself in trouble. One of those Hollywood types that got in trouble for touching too many women, and all of a sudden they have compulsive sexual behavior.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So does that fit? A little bit, but the thing is, my compulsive sexual behavior is more about getting validation for the autogynephilia. So the autogynephilia is like, I want to be seen as a woman. Internally, I see myself as a female, and I want to be validated as that. And what bigger validation can you get other than having sex with men? And they treat you like a woman the whole time you're having sex with them. I mean, that's as good as it gets for validation. So is that really compulsive sexual behavior?
What is it about the validation? Does it ground you? Does it feel, I'm trying to imagine this. Does it feel like your testosterone comes back in your system? You're going around, you're buying clothes, and you're reaching for something, and you're dressing up, and you're reaching for something. And then once that interaction happens where the man is validating you, then you finally achieve all of that reaching is finally, you can relax for a bit. Is that kind of?
Yeah, that's fair. It's good till the next time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then it resets.
It's a short-term fix. And then, depending on your sex drive, you're right back at it again. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting part of that, so we'll treat this as compulsive sexual behavior. So what they prescribe for that is naltrexone. I'm pretty sure that's the thing they use it to block the opioid receptors. And the reasoning is, so that it blocks your pleasure receptors as well, so that you won't want the sexual behaviors. And they also use antidepressants like fluoxetine. So we did that. I actually confronted my psychiatrist and hey, let's check out this angle of this thing and see what this does for me. Well, okay, so the flaw in that is, great, even if we deal with the compulsive end of it, what about my gender dysphoria? Naltrexone doesn't stop body hair from growing on me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't grow breast. It doesn't give me soft skin. Yeah, it's. That part of it is a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm. You said that the paraphilia preceded the gender dysphoria, but have you always kind of had, since your teen years or your developing years, a fraught relationship with the way that your body existed in the world by growing hair and by being this way instead of that way? No.
And the closest thing that I ever had to gender dysphoria was when I started getting body hair. Was like, okay, I really don't like this. And it was really inconvenient being, active duty military. because if I was a civilian, I would have just shaved it off, or nared it off, whatever you want to call it. But like being military, it'd be a little hard to show up to physical training in shorts with shaved legs or something. So I did have dysphoria as I got older, mainly in my 30s over the body hair. But at the same time, I had never been exposed to any of this. I didn't know what gender identity disorder was. I didn't know what gender dysphoria was. I didn't know there was trans people and transsexuals, and you could take hormones and grow breasts and everything. It's actually the knowledge that I could do those things became a feed for it. They created the gender dysphoria. I give the example of, after I started cross-dressing, well, what kind of woman am I if I don't have breasts? So I became obsessed with getting some breast forms. And then, so I was fine. I mean, I could do my little acting out sexually stuff, put the breast forms in the closet and go back to life. I mean, same thing happened with hormones. Once in 2012, when I found out you could take hormones, it was like, bam, I was just like cooked. I had to have them immediately.
Mm-hmm. And do all those additives, the clothes and the body shape changing and the hormones, how does that not solve, or how does that solve, or how does that ameliorate the autogynephilia, or at least the more negative aspects of that? Does it help you deal with that? Or is it always just an expression of it?
Well, that would get into probably Blanchard's 4 subtypes of autogynephilia. There's plenty of folks running around, and they can talk about, Blanchard says there's homosexual transsexuals and there's autogynephilic transsexuals. Very, very few folks are running around and talking about the 4 subtypes of autogynephilia that Blanchard has recognized. Mm-hmm. Let's go walk through them briefly. So you have anatomic autogynephilia. And if memory serves me right, that one captures my behaviors. So people, males they want to get into fetishes like lactating or menstruation and things of that nature. And I went down the lactation rabbit hole. I mean, before I even understood any of this was going on, I mean, even back in 2016 when I was doing the non-binary thing, I fired off a secure message to my doctor saying, hey, can you give me this prescription called domperidone, because it'll make me start lactating and I want bigger breasts. And I just told the doctor I wanted bigger breasts. The real thing was I was really fetishizing lactation. I wanted to induce lactation and be able to go, hang out with men in a sexual manner doing that. Mm-hmm. So if I had told the doctor that, there's no way I would have got the drug. But she didn't give it to me anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's me with that one. Another one is behavioral autogynephilia. And this is the one that really fires up the feminists, because this is where trans women want to be lesbians. So it's actually considered behavioral that they want to do this, or that they want to like go to a women's group and sit there knitting with other women. And see, I'm the opposite of I don't have any interest in being a lesbian. Mine is much more harmful to my relationship. So I'm not asking my wife during sex to pretend that she's a lesbian. Here I am asking her to pretend that she's a straight man during sex. And, so people could say, okay, well, what's the harm in that? All these liberated minds going, okay, you two are a married couple. What you do in the bedroom is your problem. Well, the harm in it is that's not the type of relationship she wants. And the even bigger harm is it becomes the sole type of sex I want. There's no more, all the intimacy is gone. If that's if that's the only kind of sexual gratification I'm willing to get, what kind of a marriage do we have with that?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually got the first one wrong. Was it's physiologic autogynephilia, which is the lactation, the menstruation,
Yeah.
and all
Okay.
that. Okay. The other one is called anatomic autogynephilia. And this is where we get into what I was talking about with the breast forms and all that. So me going out and buying breast forms, or me desiring to grow breast, or me desiring to get bottom surgery, turn my penis into a vagina. That all falls under the autotomic arena, and I'm guilty of that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've taken the hormones. I obsess over having breasts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the fourth type is the transvestic autogynephilia. And that touches on what we talked about earlier about fetishizing clothing.
Yeah. So all of these have a sexual component, and you brought up the word fetishistic, and there's also a clue about how it causes sex to be a non-personal activity, or non-intimate activity. It becomes something else. It becomes something distinct from you. Are there people who theorize that this is dealing with something, using sex as some sort of coping mechanism for something prior to even sexuality, like trauma, like dealing with trauma? And if that is plausible, is it helpful? Has it been helpful for you to toy around with that method of conceptualizing this?
No, I mean, I've kicked the idea around of that being trauma-based, and it doesn't hold water. I think this really just goes back to straight paraphilia stuff. I mean, my pathway into this thing, and Zucker actually wrote a article on ResearchGate about this. I in my 20s, to deal with all this, this high stress, low pay of the military, drinking was off limits, drugs were off limits, pornography wasn't. I mean, that was highly condoned. So I went down that rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, me sitting there, back in the old days, hitting the space bar, cycling through thousands of images, like kind of reprogrammed my brain, literally. Because as I'm sitting there, and this was, straight porn stuff. I'm sitting there, cycling through all these images of either naked women or couples. And the only thing I would see in there would be me in the female role. That's how it eventually kind of flipped in that direction. And then the further I went into it, it was like, okay, then it went to wearing, my wife's lingerie in private and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
The role of shame in this binge and purge cycle, is shame the useful way, or is acceptance the useful way of helping autogynephiles? Should society just embrace them and reduce the shame, go about the liberal principle of like, you do you, you be you, and we accept you, and then through that acceptance you can accept yourself and it doesn't become something that's harmful to you? Or is that shame just something that is a part of humanity that we can't get away from, and that is necessary to keep some sort of guardrails specifically on paraphilias?
Yeah, what you described in the first part of that seems to actually be the treatment, and I completely disagree with it. I don't think paraphilias should be condoned, rewarded, recognized, endorsed. None of that stuff. It is shameful behavior. So, yeah, I mean, when you touched on this earlier, I believe you said that, like, this all sounds like sexual behavior. So basically that hits the nail on the head in the sense that, okay, if you look at Blanchard's two types of transsexuals, the homosexual, transsexual, their behavior at the end of the day is sexual behavior, and the autogynephilia stuff is sexual behavior. So why should this stuff be recognized in the form of gender identity by society, and especially in the context of all the harm that it's doing to women? I mean, they have a right to stand up and say, that dude's got a paraphilia. He doesn't belong in the bathroom with me. That dude's got a paraphilia. Why is he on the racetrack with my daughter out there?
So the going about gratifying a subset of males' desire to be recognized and validated as women, it erodes women's rights. We know that. That's probably, well, for some people more than others, it's pretty obvious where that's headed. But that doesn't mean that the social aspect of that doesn't necessarily mean that not accepting men for their paraphilias doesn't give them some wiggle room to not feel such a shame about it that they hide it, right? Like if there's too much shame, then it becomes repressed. And I think that even that doesn't that drive even further more radical behaviors? Wouldn't releasing some of the strain of that allow a man to balance out his life in a way and manage it rather than kind of hide it and keep it to himself, and then it just grows and grows until it spills out?
I would respond, okay, so back in decades past, the relief valve would be you did this stuff in private, or you went to some sort of cross-dresser or transvestite club. Now it's become gender identity. People have lost the distinction between paraphilias and gender identity, and it's all in everybody's face now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
with the turning of the private public through online forums, like that's not necessarily tenable.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot endorse this. Yeah.
Okay.
And worse yet, it's been coded into law. That all I do is get down to the DMV. Once my cross-dressing and paraphilic behavior manifest into gender dysphoria, I'm free to go, oh yeah, I'm not really a transvestite, I'm a woman. I can walk down to the DMV in most states, check a box under the penalty of perjury that I'm a female. I have the same rights and legal protections of any other female. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think about that in the context of the Y spa controversy going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that kind of took a turn towards truth, and destroyed the narrative of it being a hoax. And yeah. So why don't we go back to your story then, insofar as you want to. You were kind of left to your own devices after 2019, and you lost contact with some people who seemed to be helping you to help yourself with this behavior. Mm-hmm. What happened between then and now?
Okay, so let's see. So I stopped the hormones. Said I'm going to kick this stuff. Started the groups and everything, and it worked for a little while. But then the higher my testosterone came back, it all started falling apart. And when it did, I was cut off from the medical channels, or at least I felt cut off. Because, I had it hanging over my head publicly that I had desisted and detransitioned. So I didn't want to be on hormones after I had made the declaration that I had stopped. So my solution to that was to go buy supplements. And I went, overboard on that, trying to kill my testosterone, which is basically impossible to do with supplements. And I ended up with a blood clot on, I started the supplements in the summer. They didn't help keep my testosterone down. At some points, I was literally leaving the 12-step group and going and hanging out in the park with gay men, trolling for men afterwards. So what kind of person was I being? And yeah, so that was pretty horrible behavior on my part. But like I said, I went along through that basically. For much of 2019 up until January 1st, I had this pain in my leg that wouldn't go away. And in a couple of days, I went to the emergency room, and they were like, "Hey, this isn't an injury. You've got a blood clot."
And that was the result of the hormonal, either the supplements or prior hormonal treatment?
It was the supplements.
Okay.
Like I said, I kid you not, I was literally eating like a grocery bag of supplements.
Wow.
I mean, I had, things of soy powder, I had Paria mirifica, I had bovine ovary, I had my soy pills. I mean, it was just like crazy stuff.
Huh.
Hundreds of dollars worth of supplements.
Okay.
So yeah, they were the cause of the blood clot.
Yeah.
So, the blood clot was like this wake up call for everybody. It was the wake up call for me in the way that, okay, you need to look and realize your sexual behavior is out of control again. You're obviously suffering from gender dysphoria. So I accepted that and realized I needed to do something. And I confronted the endocrinologist who took away my hormones and was like, hey, I've got a blood clot. I can't keep eating supplements. We got to confront this. So he went ahead and put me back on Leuprolide products. But most people understand that under the name Lupron, but there's actually a whole bunch of different flavors of that. And I in February of 2020, I went on what's called Eligard. Yeah.
And that is a suppressant for testosterone.
Yes, it's an off-label cancer drug. It's mainly used to treat prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But chemical castration's on the plate with this.
It is. Yeah, it is chemical castration.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, it's exactly that. It's exactly what I wanted because, I had accepted that, okay, this is really the only thing that's probably going to treat me. Because, like I said, I tried the earlier stuff. I tried the naltrexone. I tried the antidepressants. I had tried the 12-step program. So, now it's time to get the big gun out.
Okay. And then, so again, does that lead back to you feeling, disconnected from your life and like a growing sense of discontent because you're missing that aspect of your life? What happens when you, once again, try to treat your problem as like you can just cut out a source of the compulsion?
Yeah, it's helpful in the sense that all the clothing that I had restockpiled again. I had the top shelf of the closet full of wigs. I had moved all my male clothing out of the master bedroom and put it into a tiny little closet in the other part of the house. And my entire side of the male closet was once again full of female clothing. A lot of it for the purpose of entertaining men. The whole bottom side was full of high heels and all this stuff. So once I started slipping back under chemical castration, I had no interest in that stuff anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was helpful in that sense. Now, we also have to realize, we're talking, I started this in February of 2020. All hell was breaking loose with COVID back then, too.
Yeah.
So that just was kind of this double whammy of, when you're on chemical castration, the best thing you can do is get some exercise. You don't want to be like sitting in the house worried about catching COVID and eating too much food to comfort yourself. Yeah, so that was the very problematic part of that.
Okay. And along with the Lupronite, or whatever flavor of Lupron you had, was there also female hormone replacement therapy going on? Or is it just cutting out the male part?
Yeah, he did actually prescribe me what's called estradiol too.
Okay.
And it's basically literally just like most people would probably think of a testosterone gel. It's literally the same thing, but it's designed solely to put on your arms. You're not supposed to really be doing anything else with it.
And this is better than a pill or a shot? How? Other than a shot, a shot, but...
The safest way to get estrogen into your body is transdermal through the skin. Oh. Yeah. We won't go down that whole science rabbit hole, but oral estrogen is really prone to giving you blood clots. And of course, I had just had a blood clot, so that and you don't give that to people over 40 as a general guideline anyway.
Okay.
So I was forced to either doing the gel or taking the 1.5-inch needle in my leg or butt every 14 days, which is
geez.
Yeah, I don't like needles. It's freaking traumatic. So I was like, sure, give me the gel.
Okay.
And the gel had a couple purposes. One, of course, is that it feminizes me. And when your testosterone is blocked, you get a lot more. It's feminization on steroids. You're going to get as much as you're going to get. Yeah. So that that part of it. But the other thing that kind of off the radar to people, unless you're a prostate cancer patient, is you're basically putting your body into menopause. When you do chemical castration, you're like this, 60-year-old woman, waking up in the middle of the night, sweating with, the hot flashes, all that sort of stuff going on. So taking the estrogen helps deal with that. And it also protects your bones from osteoporosis, which, my prior hormone use, I don't know if you know this in my history, but I've already got osteopenia. So I've already got weak bones from all the prior hormone use. So it was, yeah.
The toll on your body, that's, how do you conceptualize that? How does that figure in? And, I'm asking this for your biographically, but also just so people understand what this is doing, if they're looking into this as a possible, way to deal with something that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the costs? Because it seems like the costs can be covered up more than they should be.
I would frame this in a different kind of manner. Okay, so on this side of the house, I've got the cost to my body. On this side of the house, I've got the paraphilia, and I've got the gender dysphoria. So which of the two is more evil for me? It's the paraphilia and the gender dysphoria.
Okay.
I'm sure I'm doing damage to my body, but the other side of the house, I'm more likely to catch HIV. And people will be, oh, you could just go on PrEP. Well, they don't realize how dangerous PrEP is to the kidneys, especially when you're over 50. It's like serious stuff taking PrEP. So it seems like, my best course of action would just be the chemical castration route, kill off the paraphilic drive, kill off the gender dysphoria, get the body changes that I so craved, and then just kind of just like ignore the risk to my body over here.
Okay.
But speaking to that risk, it reared its head in May of 2020 at, I think it was like 3:30 in the morning or something. This one morning, it was early May, and I sleep with my stomach, and I came up with my elbows, and I couldn't breathe, and I was like trying to wake my wife up, and I couldn't talk either. It was like the most I could do was like get out a whisper, and I was like sure I was having a heart attack. So I woke her up, and she's freaking out. She's going like, "What's wrong?" or whatever, and I could barely even talk to respond to her, and it's like I barely made it to the recliner in the living room, and I was like calling an ambulance, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to die. You just got to take me to the hospital. And she rushed me over to the hospital, which was like, I don't know, 6-7 miles away. I stumbled into the ER. They put me on the heart machines, all that stuff, drawing multiple tubes of blood to see if I had a heart attack, feeding me baby aspirin. And in the end, it all turned out inconclusive, because because of COVID, I had switched from a monthly leuprolide injection to a 90-day injection, which I had taken about 4 weeks before. So I had this massive dose of leuprolide, Eligard, in me. And on the other hand, about a week before, I had started an antidepressant. So it was kind of like up in the air about, inconclusive about which one was to blame.
Yeah.
And in the end, they wrote it off as an anxiety attack.
Okay. Just something.
Yeah, but it did get recycled into harm against me down the road. Yeah, we can get to that.
Okay.
So, I had my little almost heart attack issue, made it through the summer. I gained a lot of weight. My weight ballooned up to about 187, and I normally hover around 170 to 174. So that was pretty out of control. And yeah, and I just, everything just started falling apart. Yeah, like I said, kind of cut off from everybody, and stuck in the house with COVID. Here I am, just all fat and ugly and everything. And I just got it in my head that I should move. I wasn't getting along with the neighbors anyway. I didn't like my neighborhood. I didn't like living under the HOA that wasn't enforcing rules. So that kind of just gave me an excuse to move, and I did. And right before I moved, I was also back to, this is an important piece of that, back to the regret piece. I was back entering into the regret stage about, I haven't had sex in 9 freaking months. I missed the excitement of all that crap I was doing. And that kind of gave me this other, excuse, I guess you can basically call it, to move. And I also, quit the drugs. I wrote the endocrinologist and said, hey, I'm going to make give life a try again on testosterone and see if I can make it this time. Yeah.
So you uprooted yourself from your physical place, but also from what your body was in, like your environmental, your internal environment and your external environment at the same time. Yeah. You changed them all.
Yep.
You hit the great reset squared kind of thing.
Yeah. Another piece of that I wrestle with too is one of my more recent diagnoses is the borderline personality thing, or borderline personality disorder. And one of the traits with that is you're like constantly reinventing yourself. You get bored with life and you just want to just like start over, and you don't really care what the costs are. And that's definitely a good fit for what I did, because I literally got rid of most of my possessions, everything that wouldn't fit into a U-Haul trailer. And he said, got rid of my house, just walked away from it all. Just got to start a whole new life. Got to give it a go as male again. Boy, that didn't last long.
No.
No, I got to my new destination. I'm back on the West Coast, not Portland, by the way. I loved parts of Portland, but when I watch Andy NGO post all the time, there's just like no way in hell I'm going to Portland.
Yeah.
But so I got to my new destination, and it was like, I reflected back on what I had done, and I was like, I'm in trouble. No two ways about that. I was definitely in trouble. So I did a walk-in mental health appointment, and told them what I had did, and said, hey, it's probably best to get me on psych drugs, and oh, by the way, also get me an appointment back to endocrinology. And psych drugs I got immediately. I walked out with them that day, but the endocrinology piece turned out to be a real nightmare. This was November of 2020. My first appointment with the endocrinologist wasn't until March of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I took the psych drugs, and of course my testicles started coming back to life. And that, with the testosterone production, it's literally almost like somebody was giving me injections of testosterone. That's how hard it was hitting me. And by February, I still had a bunch of the estrogel. I was literally taking the estrogel and smearing it on my testicles, trying to cut off the testosterone production.
Okay.
So that was on like one side of my body. And on the autogynephilia side of the house, on my breast, I was doing what you're definitely not supposed to do. I was putting the estrogel on my nipples, trying to keep my breast growth up. Yeah. So what that resulted in was, okay, estrogel is an alcohol-based gel. So can you imagine putting something alcohol-based on your testicles and the sensitive skin of your nipples?
Seems like a cold endeavor in the immediate run.
It was okay for about 3 weeks.
Okay.
At that point, my testicles were about as red as an apple. The skin was just like totally inflamed. And I literally had like skin peeling off on my areolas around my nipples. I literally just like alcohol burns on my breast. Yeah. That's how bad the gender dysphoria got.
Okay. Okay. So again, the behavior or the desire is pushing you in a direction where you're actively harming yourself. You're going, like, it seems like there's some sort of, on one level, like you're trying to achieve some sort of pleasure. On another level, you're trying to escape from a source of pain. And then those two combined are causing you to treat your body and subject your body to very harsh conditions. And do you have any help for that? What does that lead you to do? How do you get help for that? Or
the only avenue I saw out of that was getting back on Lupron again. Going back to the chemical castration. Yeah, I mean, it was like, I mean, it's so distressing. I can't even begin to describe what I was going through during that period. And then turn around. I guess a good point on that, though. The difference between a paraphilia and a paraphilic disorder would be you cross over to the point where you're harming yourself. So that I believe that's how the clinicians put a distinction between the two.
okay,
So they might say a paraphilia is harmless, but once I guess you could use the example of a pedophile. As long as a pedophile is behaving and they're not acting out and doing anything against kids, people are like, okay, well, why should we hurt this person, or why should we ostracize this person? They're behaving. But once they cross that line, then they're causing harm. And it's the same way with the paraphilia that I have.
Your paraphilia doesn't necessarily have that dire of a consequence as subjecting a child to potential lifelong trauma or whatever. But it does have social consequences for you, and it does have psychological consequences for you, such as feeling shame, as you said, and making your relationships, or sapping the intimacy out of your relationships. So it does have more than just physical harm that you're subjecting yourself to.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at, I'm harming myself. I'm harming my wife by forcing her to go along with sexual behaviors that she's not really comfortable with. I'm harming females by it causing me to identify as a female. And we could, if I was an athlete, then we could up that into, I'm out doing, competing in sports and harming females. So the harm just keeps mounting on the thing. Yeah, sure, it doesn't rise to the level of molesting somebody's kid. You can't ignore all the other harms at the same time. Yeah,
especially insofar as if it becomes accepted or promoted by society, then the harms ramp up from a private disposition or paraphilia or just a kink in the light sense of the terms, to reorganizing all of society around facilitating this. It's like treating the treating of autogynephiles like just installing a wheelchair ramp or putting in a disabled parking lot. It actually has much larger consequences, especially for females, with regards to male autogynephile.
Yeah, I mean, again, we could use the example of what if I had went to a spa like that one person did?
Yeah.
And I don't want to accuse them of being guilty until they go to trial. I mean, I think that's an important aspect of that case. You're innocent until proven guilty. I mean, they look pretty guilty at this point, but they're not convicted. So I'm not going to convict them at this stage of the game. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on that thing. And Okay, so we had the testicle and nipple incident. I got pretty harmed by that. Made it up till March. Had my big day where I went to see the endocrinologist. Finally got my appointment. That was a total shit show, to use harsh language. So I went in, and first they typically have interns. And I got seen by an intern initially, and I was kind of joking with her. I was kind of like, "Hey, you don't want to do anything to me. You don't want to kill me. You'll end up on Fox News or something." And she didn't think that was funny at all. I could tell she definitely wasn't a conservative by any means. So she took my history, and then she brought back the endocrinologist, and she's like, "Well, are you transitioning?" And I'm like, "No, I can't become a female. I've already been down that road. I just, I understand that, you need to treat me with transgender woman protocols, but, I'm not identifying as a female, and I just want the medications. I want to get put back on Lupron." And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, Lupron is for trans kids. Adults don't get that sort of thing." And I was kind of taken aback of what her awareness was of the drug. And the conversation just proceeded like that. We just went round and round where she's like, "Are you transitioning?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not a female." "Are you transitioning?" "No, I'm not a female." And finally, I just kind of went on. I didn't scream at her, but I just said, like, "Treat me like a pedophile and shut off my testosterone," is exactly what I told her. And it was just like, the proverbial turd in the punch bowl. Yeah, she was just like, her response was, I'll see you in 4 months. So I left with no prescriptions whatsoever. And this was up on the second floor of the VA hospital. And I walked out of the clinic, and I literally felt like going over the glass into the atrium below on my head. I was literally just like instantly suicidal over that.
Okay. And how did you come down from that?
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe that was like March 3rd. And it just escalated. And the other piece that was going on in the background at the time, the June 10th of 2021 was the big 5-year anniversary of my non-binary court case. So after June 10th meant that these quacks who had written letters claiming that I was non-binary could no longer be sued, because for years I had wanted to bring a medical malpractice case against them. Okay. Yeah, because there was just so many things wrong with that whole thing, and I've noticed that same feeling in a lot of the D-sisters and detransitioners, where they have this intense anger at the healthcare officials or clinicians, whatever you want to call them. It's just like you have this sense of being harmed, and and you also kind of want revenge in a way. I didn't want to like physically harm them, but I wanted to see them punished civilly for acting so outrageously, to actually go along with the ruse that I could be neither male or female, or no sex at all, non-binary. Mm-hmm. So that had just been eating away at me for years, and I hadn't been able to get any legal help on the issue. And here the 5-year anniversary was coming up. And after the 5-year anniversary, the statute of limitations would kick in, and I was forever barred from taking legal action against them. So I had that going on. I had the gender dysphoria going on, and I had the paraphilia going on. So by April, I was like totally suicidal. I got up one morning and I played around on the computer, did some stuff, and finally I just broke out crying. Yeah.
What were you expressing by crying? Frustration, exhaustion?
Whew. I was ready to get it over.
Yeah.
Yeah, things were bad.
Yeah.
Sorry about the cheer show.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so after I threatened to kill myself, she took me down to the ER. And had Psych day number 4. Yeah. That wasn't any more fun than the endocrinologist appointment. Whew. Yeah. It's funny, I was never hospitalized prior to going down the smoke and gender hole. Whew. Yeah, so the hospitalization, well, I don't even have words for that. So, of course, I had threatened to kill myself. So, they locked me up in the psych ward, and I actually thought I was going to get some help. And that was anything but help. It's almost kind of comical. I could use a good laugh to get me out of this right now. But yeah. So they actually, kind of the way it went down was they would question me almost on a daily basis. And it was, I later, once I got out, I got to read my medical records about all the stuff they had written. And I mean, there was stuff in there like patient is talking about autogynephilia, and autogynephilia isn't in the DSM. These are psychiatrists, by the way, licensed psychiatrists. So, one wrote in my record that autogynephilia wasn't in the DSM, and 2 other psychiatrists signed off on the note. And they were also writing things like patient continues to deny he's female. Patient continues to identify as male. I mean, that's literally in my record. I mean, how else can you describe torturing somebody other than writing in there that patient continues to identify as male? What does that signify that you've been doing?
It's astounding how far that's gone. Where the delusion is the only reality or diagnosis, according to whatever structure these people are operating under, whether personal belief or because they have to, on pain of being fired or whatever. And then you either have to go along with that, or participate in that, and then act out everything that follows from that, socially, just everything that follows from that, which we're seeing happen in our society. Or you try to be honest and vulnerable and open and are ignored, or nobody can actually see you without putting you into this thing that can't see you, actually denies your existence and your pain.
Yeah, I mean, I would frame this stuff differently. What went on in the psych ward was, in addition to medical malpractice, this gets back into all the activism that has suppressed Blanchard's work. The they weren't doing this really to be mean to me. They were doing this out of ignorance. They had no understanding of autogynephilia. I mean, when I came home, I was able to find autogynephilia in the DSM 5 times. So if I can find it, why can't a psychiatrist find it? But I suspect they never had any training on this topic, right? So if you don't know about it and you don't believe in it, why are you going to endorse the crazy person in the psych ward? Right, so that's how that whole thing went for the 14 days that I was in there, and I was still suicidal. I mean, at one point I was thinking about removing my testicles with the toothpaste tube, which that thing was like, I had this tube of toothpaste that had this like almost razor sharp tip on the bottom of it, and I was like, did you really put this in a psych ward? And I was literally just like day after day trying to get the courage up. Then they took it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of our daily questioning was, are you still having thoughts of harming yourself? And it was like, yeah, I'm thinking about cutting off my testicles with the toothpaste tube. So at one point I stopped eating. Yeah, I didn't eat for about 80 hours. Yeah, as you can tell, there was some trauma involved.
Yeah, it's very fresh and recent.
Yeah, and they made it very clear to me at one point. It was about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way in. We had a meeting one day, and they were like very clear that you're not getting any Lupron. We're not doing anything for you. This is, acute inpatient. So you can just, get over yourself and move on. Yeah. So that was the point where I stopped eating for 3 days. Yeah, after I walked out of that meeting, but after about 80 hours of not eating and my wife crying, she would come visit at night, and she's going like, please don't die. So I just kind of snapped out of it, and it was like, are you still suicidal? And I'm like, nope.
Yeah. Just tell them what they want to hear.
Yep. So they were kind of taken aback at that. So you're not suicidal anymore? Nope. No more thoughts about harming myself. And so once I did that, I told them I wanted to be released because obviously wasn't going to get any care. And I had to go in front of a judge, and fortunately the judge let me out, even though the court doctors told him not to. Yeah.
So you'd rather be on your own than in their care, in their hands?
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. Well, what's the point of being literally in jail if you're not getting any treatment while you're there, right? And the dark side of that question is too that if I was going to go ahead and kill myself, I couldn't do it there. Yes. So yeah, I just told him I wasn't suicidal anymore, and like I said, the judge let me out. So of course I went home and read all the crap that they had written in my medical records, like I was telling you about earlier. Mm-hmm. And then I managed to. I ran across how the paraphilia was excluded from coverage. That was the point where I did the research on that, and I figured out the only way I could get any treatment was to go the gender dysphoria route.
And what were the conditions of you being able to accept that, and what is the cost of accepting that?
This isn't living authentically. This is living the lie. Like I said, back to, I wanted to accept my problems. Own up to them. Get the treatment for them. And it was kind of like the only way I could get it was to go back to this. Yeah. The only way I could get it at least really hassle-free. So, once I started saying, I stopped talking about paraphilias and I only started talking about having gender dysphoria, which wasn't a lie. I mean, I had gender dysphoria. Mm-hmm. I just had to rearrange those priorities there, the pyramid. And once I started did that, I had no problems getting appointments, and I've since got put back on Lupron again, getting estrogen injections again. The paraphilia is in the rearview window again, and honestly, at this point, I feel like I could toss the Lisa Shupe thing back out the window and go back to James.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't made any formal legal changes, but as far as in the medical system, I'm allowed to self-identify. So I changed my self-identified gender to female.
Yeah.
And I adopted the name Lisa.
Yeah.
Short for Alyssa, but I use Lisa. And that's how I'm known medically now.
Okay.
So that has created, it's basically just knock down all the barriers to care.
Okay, so you are a trans-identified, male-identified, gender dysphoric autogynephile then. Like that's your. Do you have a flag, and would you be the only one that would fly that during Pride?
Yeah, I would be out there. It would be a solo parade. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, after what I've experienced you've seen the cost now of me coming out and saying, hey, my gender identity is really a paraphilia. So that's the cost of this. They will shut off your care. The only avenue to treatment is going the gender dysphoria route. So which way, I mean, people can still, they can still use that as a legitimate means to get care. So there's really no barrier for them to, if they want to go my route and be honest, they can do it. But how many folks are willing to do it? I don't know any.
And to what extent is the medical establishment learning, or the people who work in there learning about this at all? Because as you said, from your stay and from your interaction with the doctors and the medical professionals, they know kind of about the gender dysphoria thing, but the autogynephilia thing is unknown. So they're not ever going to treat that. Maybe not medically. Maybe there's counselors, psychologists, and online, some sort of online system network for people in your condition. Is there that? Do you have hope for that? Is that needed for you and for others?
Yeah, I mean, I would frame it as they just need to, everybody just needs to blow the lid off of this thing.
Okay.
We need to start teaching it in medical school. We need to start teaching it to the psychologists and the psychiatrists and, all the folks involved with gender. But, in reality, all this stuff is already in the DSM. It's just, I think I've seen Blanchard online in his Twitter feed use the word wrong think. Yeah, there's as much stigma for a clinician to diagnose me with transvestic fetishism with autogynephilia as there is for me to come forward and accept the diagnosis. So that's kind of where we're at on this thing. I mean, I do have it now. I mean, it's prominently in my medical records that I have a paraphilia, and in the comment section it says autogynephilia. So I have a diagnosis of transvestic fetishism also, and gender dysphoria. So, I've taken my medicine.
Yeah. Is there, in your mind, what is the care that you would want for specifically for fetishistic transvestitism and autogynephile? What is there something positive beyond the hormonal and the medical route, or do you think that it has to be that paired with some sort of psychological or social network?
What I would want would be a whole bunch of things. Okay. First, at my stage of this thing, we have to chemically castrate me. Okay, so that's just like, it's kind of like an alcoholic where you give them, what's the drug they get? It used to be Antabuse. It's probably naltrexone now. So, you get them to stop drinking, which would be, the chemical castration for me, the equivalent of that. So, okay, so we get that out of the way, and we get me where I'm kind of returned to, a baseline where I'm able to be treated. Because in that state, it's, again, to use the comparison of an alcoholic, if an alcoholic's sitting there drinking, you can't really treat them for alcoholism. Okay. So you have to, get me chemically castrated, get me settled down. And then I would want therapy to actually try to change this. Again, that's very unpopular. How many, you see all these efforts popping up.
Conversion therapy, yeah.
Yeah, but what if I want it? So just because you don't like it, why should I be barred from having it? I think that's a fair question. You might feel it's a threat to you because you affecting what you want to do, but what about me? What about my wife?
Have you seen any therapeutic route that is beneficial for you after you get the compulsion under control with the chemical stuff? What has been helping you, or what have you seen that's promising that helps you?
Nothing, because nobody's allowed to try. Yeah.
Okay, so you feel completely out on a limb and left out to dry.
Yeah. I mean, sure, they've agreed to chemically castrate me at this point under the premise of gender dysphoria, but as far as willingness to change the paraphilia or even attempt to change the paraphilia, that's totally off limits. In fact, I had part of my care team in the psych ward was a social worker. I thought he was working for me, but he wasn't. That became clear. He made it very clear that he was an employee of the VA, and everything he did was in the interest of the VA. But I had a conversation with him one day where I talked about the 12-step program, and I was like, this is a paraphilia. I was like, I would be more comfortable if you just threw me in with a bunch of sex offenders, other people who have paraphilias, and got me treatment that way, instead of me going off and sitting with alcoholics and drug addicts trying to get better. And he was like, that's not happening. I know of no such program. You're not getting it. Get it out of your head. Yeah.
So why come back to, I guess, to kind of go full circle? Why come back to the public? Speaking
out?
Yeah.
People need to know the truth. They need to know, what I really have. And, especially me coming back under the female umbrella. I mean, yeah, sure. I'll put it this way. If you want to go out and write an article saying that, hey, Shupe can't stop being trans, I would applaud you for doing that. But one caveat, you write in there that I can't stop being trans because I have a paraphilia. As long as you're really willing to, tell the whole story, hey, say whatever you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about getting more famous or anything like that. I mean, hey, I've already knocked off the Wikipedia page and the 200 media interviews and all that crap. I'm not getting any more famous at this point,
or any more canceled, for that matter.
Yeah. That's a very extremely good point. I can't get any more canceled at this point. Yeah. So I mean, Yeah, I think another big part of my motivation is, it's not right for me to call myself a feminist, and I don't consider myself as one, but I do call myself a feminist ally. And, me telling the truth about what's at work of, what my gender identity is actually composed of, me stepping forward and saying, hey, it's not a gender identity, it's a paraphilia, is what people need to hear. They need to know that, all these women who are out there, fighting for sex-based rights aren't doing it because they're bigots. Yeah. I mean, they're doing it because people like me are a problem to them.
What about the men out there that are in a similar position to you or headed in that direction? What can we do to help them? What is the proper way to help them? What do they need? What do you need as a group? And can you do that? And would that help you to help others like you?
Yeah, back to first things first, you have to have the awareness. And if you, and another piece of that, of course, is if you can't get the treatment without telling lies, how is that helpful? So I think, the first thing I would do, which, of course I have no power in this, but all those folks who write the DSM every time it pops out every few years, just like they work to rearrange gender dysphoria from gender identity disorder, well, they should probably be working to get the exclusion lifted on paraphilias for treatment of paraphilias. That would help sex offenders too. It would be a lot nicer, I'm sure. Unfortunately, I don't have the pedophilia problem, but if I did, it would be a whole lot nicer if I could go down somewhere and say, hey, I think you should put me on Lupron so I don't cause any problems, rather than it being excluded by coverage from insurance companies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, there is an absence of any type of support groups for this kind of thing. Other than, hanging out anonymously in Reddit or something.
You don't think that is sufficient then? Reddit isn't sufficient to solve the world's problems?
No. Yeah. All that voting stuff and banning you for saying the wrong thing, there's nothing therapeutic about that.
Yeah. Well, just for wrapping up the interview, it seems like, I'm sorry to say this, it seems like you're in a despairing spot right now. And is there hope for you? Where does hope lie? What do you need? I can't help you, but
I know.
Is there help for you? Can people help you? What's next? What's the future look like to you?
I don't know. It's literally one day at a time. It's just, as I've said, it's not a pleasant state to be chemically castrated. It's literally the equivalent of having prostate cancer. Not having any fun with it, but it's just kind of a necessary evil. And I've just got to kind of work my way through it and reach radical acceptance about my situation and make the best of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My wife's a lot happier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you able to focus your energies on something creative or productive or crafty? Or writing, perhaps?
Yeah. I do my writing. Yeah, all the stuff nobody will publish. Yeah, so I write. I go to the gym. I walk my dog. I continue to work on my Transgender Archives website. I'm back on Twitter now. I do my little recreation activities. I get out and do things in public, and it's just the great thing is it's not paraphilic driven anymore. Yeah, I'm living more of a normal life. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna wrap up the recording now. Thank you. How do I identify you for legal and personal reasons? Do I just say Shupe? Is that
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, like I said, I haven't formally changed my name or anything. I don't fight that pronoun stuff. I don't believe in it. It's compelled speech. People can call me James. They can call me Lisa. They can call me she, him, her, whatever they want to do. It's just kind of bouncing off me at this point. But yeah, in my medical records, I'm Lisa Shupe. And my gender identity is female. I'm known that way on Twitter. Even my neighbors are calling me Lisa now, and yeah, I'm just seeing where it's going. But I think ultimately it's probably going back to James. If my healthcare team would sign a contract today saying that they would treat the paraphilia and not hassle me about it,
okay?
I would go back to James as soon as I handed them the paper back. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's where I'm at on that.
Thanks for returning, and thank you on behalf of my audience for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell this story, because people needed to hear it. As painful as it was to, I didn't sleep well last night thinking this is gonna be a rough interview, but I've got to do this. So you take care of yourself, stay safe.
Messed up.
Yeah, continue to doing your work, and I'll continue to do mine.
Excellent.
Long live Dr. Blanchard.
Oh yeah, all hail Blanchard.
Yep.
Congratulations for reaching the end of the discussion. If you enjoyed it, do be sure to leave a review or a comment or a thumbs up or whatever you need to do to show that glorious algorithm that this is some good stuff. And do be sure to go and check that back catalog, as it is brimming full of fantastic conversations. Links to provide monetary support are down there in the description as well. Have a good night.